Hey, hey, hey. Hey, what's up? Deep in the Rap series. PVD nonprofit, how are you? Hey, 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 hey. We're about to get started in just a few minutes. Amy is here right on time. Let's make sure she's... Please come through.
What's up?
Yes.
I'm here. I'm timely.
How are you?
I'm good. Work from home life. It's been great.
It's been great, huh?
Yeah.
That's good. How's the family?
Everyone's good. Everyone's safe.
Good.
Yeah. What about you? How are you?
Everyone's good. I'm just, I'm in need of a barber.
Well, actually, I can't go to your house or anything, but my little brothers have been asking me for haircuts, so we'll see what happens.
Really? Oh,
well, one of them did. He's pretty bold.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, anything works, at this moment. Yo, I'm so happy that you're agreeing to do this, though.
Of course.
Yes.
I'm here.
So, we have like a few people. I guess I'll just get started for the sake of time.
Sweet.
Just so you know that this conversation will be recorded. And so, as we have a fleeting audience. So, we'll just kind of resume and, converse, in a sort of like an ongoing fashion, not necessarily have to like repeat ourselves or anything like that. But yeah, so for the people that are in, welcome to Deeper Than Rap. Of course, I am Jon Hope, and I'm excited for this week's conversation. I don't even know where to begin, but Amy is one of my favorite people in the world. I've known her for a long time. Shout out to Saronica. I would say, I'm not even playing when I say this. I never told her this, but when I leave her presence, I always feel better.
No way.
I swear
That's
to God.
so sweet.
I swear to God, man. Like you just have it's no surprise the great work that you do, because I saw it back then. I had the privilege of getting a glimpse into your process.
Yeah, you did.
Studying long nights and all that good stuff at the library and whatnot.
Studying, working on research papers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, I'm really excited, and I just want to turn it over to you if you want to just let the people know who you are, the work you do, and whatever.
Yeah, so my name's Ammy Sena. I work as a mental health counselor right now in a college counseling office, and I outreach to students of color, both domestic and international. So I guess I would be like an intercultural specialist is what my other title is at the university that I work at. But yeah, so some of my interests are just thinking about wellness and healing in communities of color, specifically those of the African diaspora. So
nice.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is I'm so curious about that field, and the field in which you occupy. Is that like is it a growing field? Is it how prevalent is it? Because I can remember when I was in grad school, just the notion of thinking that I could go to seek help, but more times than not, the person didn't even look like me, right? Like, and then that was just such a disconnect, that, you know, maybe by through default, I had to just persist and just go, because I do believe in therapy. But I mean, like, how prevalent is your field and the work that you do now versus, you know, years ago?
Yeah, it's definitely changing. And college counseling centers across America are experiencing like changes in numbers and increases in utilization. So much so that like we can't meet the demands of what's going on. And we were experiencing it at the college counseling center that I work in. But in terms of like representation and race, there's definitely been more changes in terms of like what research looks like and how we can decolonize psychology or mental health and wellness, and thinking about even the ethics of our association, like this doesn't make sense for communities of color. So there's more intentional research kind of being done to like meet the wellness needs of communities of color. However, it's still like a fight that I think everyone's kind of still trying to do.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's good. And you know, pivoting, what's your relationship with hip hop, like, and just music and all that good stuff?
For sure. I mean, growing up, so I grew up South Side, Providence, and then moved to Cranston. So it was like, you know, the culture clash was like a big thing.
Of course.
But just growing up in South Side, like you just heard it everywhere you went. So just my friends listening to it, and then us talking about it, feeling like most people of color that I've encountered in the media were coming from music, and me being kind of drawn to that. Also thinking about like Dominican music and artists, and how, like, you know, some of the most famous people were Afro-Caribbean folks, and kind of, you know, in the media. So that's kind of where like my interest in music kicks in. And then that music kind of talked about the experience of like people of color, right? So like immigration, beauty, just like the struggles of being like a poor immigrant in the US or whatever it would be. So that's kind of where my connection to music has come from. So
word. Awesome. Well, which brings you brings us here. So the way I go about Deeper Than Rap is basically we identify a song, and we'll play the song. I have the lyrics in front of me. Shout out to Rap Genius, and and we'll just kind of process the song, and we could, you know, outline certain lyrics that resonate and sort of try to create threads. And for the folks that are in here, even though it's Amy and I, this is a very inclusive conversation, so we're going to resort to comments and, you know, really invite some of the feedback, and just have a, you know, coffee talk, you know what I'm saying? Real lighthearted. But I think the goal of Deeper Than Rap is just to allow students and practitioners or people who have an affinity for education and dismantling systems to be able to articulate it in a way where there's removal of elitist language. We just kind of we already know what the baseline is, so we don't need to come with, you know, we don't need to stand on ceremony, you know what I mean? And it's about providing an entry point for particularly students of marginalized groups.
For sure.
Shout out, someone says, yay, this sounds fun. That's what's up.
That's my friend right there.
What's
up, Rudy?
I love it. All right, so I'm gonna play the record. We'll just listen, and then afterwards we'll just have a chat.
Sweet.
All right, here we go. So this week's song is YBN Cordae, 1,000 Words, off of his critically acclaimed debut, The Lost Boy.
They say your picture's worth 1,000 words. You paint a canvas, better let it shine. I know I done some things that dead or wrong. The flash is on this little light of mine. Yeah, they say your picture's worth 1,000 words. You paint a canvas, better let it shine. I know I done some things that dead or wrong. The flash is on this little light of mine. A picture's worth 1,000 words, a video worth 1,000,000, but no amount of likes can heal up all this pain that I'm feeling. Maybe conceal it and hide in all these problems we deal with. I grew up on the principle to raise a child need a village. I think we all want to be a little Instagram famous. Deep down inside, nobody really want to be nameless, afraid of being forgotten. So this troll shit we plotting, sitting on this phone for hours, feel my brain getting rotten. But I can give a fuck less, dog. A nigga is popping. All these bitches that's flocking. Shit, a nigga got options. But what's really important is such a silly distortion. We all stuck in this matrix, trying to hide our misfortune. They say your picture's worth 1,000 words. You paint a canvas, better let it shine. I know I done some things that dead or wrong. The flash is on this little light of mine. Yeah, they say your picture's worth 1,000 words. You paint a canvas, better let it shine. I know I done some things that dead or wrong. The flash is on this little light of mine. Living in this false reality that's in this picture gallery. Based on a nigga's profile, we get some salary. The lifestyle you advertise was quite strategized. Make a minimal amount and then we maximize. These niggas capping with lies, how they capitalize. Creating their own perception with a massive facade. Digital marketing schemes, even broader regime. Live how you want on the internet. Who thought of this thing? I mean, I guess it ain't the worst shit. If life was picture perfect, who could paint a picture vivid as media circus? The surface is much deeper than even the earth is. I searched it, looking for purpose, like my first kiss. At the same time, this shit will have you feeling worthless. Back into reality, woke up and just reversed it. Now I'm a new man, even got a new gram. But let me take a picture with this money by my new land. They say your picture's worth 1,000 words. You paint a canvas, better let it shine. I know I done some things that dead or wrong. The flash is on this little light of mine. Yeah, they say your picture's worth 1,000 words. You paint a canvas, better let it shine. I know I done some things that dead or wrong. The flash is on this little light of mine. Yeah.
Woo! It's such a vibe, man.
Yep.
It's such a vibe. Oh man. So, Amy,
What's up?
what are your thoughts? And here's the thing: this is a free-flowing conversation, so we can go, as I imagine that we've had numerous conversations.
Yeah.
We can go a number of different ways with this. So, you know, what do you get from this, and what are some connections, and just overall, you know, how do you feel about the record?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I feel like the overarching theme is just social media, right? And how it's being used, and what motives we have behind kind of that usage in social media. So, I mean, I it's super relevant, especially now with like COVID-19, where I'm spending way too much time on my social media, and I'm like,
Right.
let me think about how I'm actually kind of using my social media. How is it that I'm looking at people's lives? And it's interesting because we can't leave, so no one can flex as hard as like before.
Exactly. Oh,
So
man,
this song was like super relevant. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think that's so interesting. Considering what's going on. So it seems like, and I don't know, I don't have any hard data or anything like that, but like the vanity is reduced because less selfies, less, you know what I mean? Like you said, the less flexing is really interesting. And I think, you know, building upon that point, we've heard so many times about the connection between mental health and consumption of social media, right? And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, since we have to quarantine, since we can't flex, and people rely on that heavily, how does that, I wonder if that impacts people's sense of self.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, you know, maybe people, because there's so much social comparison, you know what I mean? People might not be so so eager to share themselves with people, and then in turn it's a feeling of inadequacy, you know what I mean? And I hope I said that right.
Yeah, I know you definitely spoke about multiple topics in that kind of comment. So
Yeah.
I'm like, where do I want to go?
Yeah.
But yeah, there is this like underarching kind of theme of like inadequacy, just this like, you know, like I have some needs that maybe weren't met earlier on, and like I'm using kind of social media to like fulfill that need. And we
Yeah.
definitely see it in the song, right? Especially in the first verse, he goes right
Yeah.
into it. But no amount of likes can heal up all this pain that I'm feeling, maybe conceal it and hide it in all these problems we deal with.
Oh,
Yeah, just in that verse, that whole verse is like
yeah.
packed with like, okay, social media is like, I'm kind of using it to kind of hide this need, these feelings that I have kind of inside. And he explores it a little bit more as the song kind of goes on. But yeah, there's this like coping that happens with social media.
Yeah, yeah, and it's sort of obviously in that line it's pseudo, right? It's not, they're not really getting to the root of the issue. It's sort of like a band-aid. And then you know, the duality of social media. You hear on one end, oh, social media is bad, and you know, and, only in moderation, or whatever the case may be, or you know, clout chasing and things of that nature, right? But then now, as we, you know, life as we know it has completely changed, right? Like,
Yeah.
as we know it from this day forward, life has changed. And so there's a lot of, you know, you're doing Zoom, where, you know, we're conversing
Live,
like this,
yeah.
right? And so I'm wondering how that, and maybe you could speak to this, the idea of teletherapy, right?
Yeah.
So how does that kind of play a part? You know what I'm saying? As a tool, that our students and young people and people in general can recognize, in this whole, you know, in amongst the umbrella of social media is bad and this, that, and the third. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think, and what's interesting is like before all of this was happening, there was like this stigma I feel in the mental health world that those who provided teletherapy, telemental health support, weren't really doing it the right way. Like ethically,
Really?
yeah, like ethically, it's not a thing. Like,
oh my
it should be
God!
like your last resort,
Wow.
in therapy. Like, for like most of it, I think has to do with like crisis situations. Like if a crisis kind of comes up, then like you're far removed from the person. But so there was this like big stigma behind it, and like
That's
kind of weird
interesting. I didn't know
sketchiness.
that. Yeah. Were they
Yeah.
seen as like the were they kind of like the low, like seen as not really qualified, or like the low on the totem pole?
So you still have to be like a licensed
Gotcha.
therapist
Okay.
to, if you're taking insurance, to provide kind of the support. But it seemed as like, in worst case scenario, if you don't have access to like in-person counseling, or you don't have access to like a treatment center, then you could do virtual counseling. So
Yeah.
there's all these laws. There's laws that kind of say like, I can't provide support across state lines if I'm not licensed in the state that person or that client is in.
Wow.
Yeah. So now
Okay.
with like this COVID situation, it's like, well, this is the best we got. So now we're all providing like virtual mental health support.
Oh my goodness.
And I feel there's like a generational thing there too. Like older mental health clinicians will be like, it's a little weird. Younger clinicians are like, it's okay. And then I think if like, depending on your clientele, like who you're working with, they have like more or less, they're more open to it. So I feel like college students are like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't care. Like, they're super casual.
Right.
But like maybe older folks will have like more like, I don't know if I want to do that right now.
Right.
I would prefer to wait till after. But there's an interesting feeling that I had in therapy when I was first doing it virtually, that I shared with my like supervisor, which is like, there's a sense of intimacy that happens through like video chatting, because you do it with like your friends, you do it with people who are long distance.
Right.
And so when you have to turn that mentality to like clients, where there's like a separation of a relationship that is happening, right? Like it's not as intimate in the way
Right.
that's like reciprocal. It's like it's an intimate place for us, but there's only so much I can show in that moment. And I actually had a few clients at the end of their call tell me like they love me at the end, which doesn't happen in in-person therapy. They'll be like, okay, bye, love you, take care. Like, just,
oh my God.
because it's so natural for them to think about it in like this like intimate way that I connect with my friends and my family.
Sure.
This is kind of off of the social media tangent, but yeah, that's just kind of what I've noticed in this COVID providing telemental health support.
Yeah. So and that's interesting. I never even thought about it that way, but like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, because I'm assuming that because they're not in your physical presence, do you find that there's more sharing, and because I don't, it's almost like the idea of like when we text, people are a little bit more apt to say what's on their mind, because there's not an immediate either response or blowback or whatever the case may be, rather than talking. And I'm wondering if that sentiment translates in a video chat, because you're not there with that person, and so maybe there's a reduction in sort of awkwardness or whatever.
Yeah, actually, I feel like I'm experiencing the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, like I feel like
you.
it's a little bit more and there's like there's things that kind of play a role in this. But I feel like I'm experiencing the opposite, where it's not as deep or as personal. There's something about like being in person with someone, reading, like bouncing off of their body language, that makes therapy kind of like really deep and personal and emotional for someone. But virtually, I haven't had like any like real deep, intimate conversations.
Yeah.
But that could also be just like the situation we're living in now. Like everyone's so focused on this pandemic and how I'm adjusting my life to it, that we're just talking about adjustment to this pandemic, and not necessarily like my childhood trauma or my like poor coping skills as much, because people are just like, okay, putting things into perspective, this takes priority for my survival right now over like all that past stuff. So there's a lot of factors kind of in there.
Let's get to the people, see what some of these comments are. So I'm seeing someone is co-signing what you said. We can't leave so no one can flex as hard. Yes, thank you. How does therapy change things when you can't use body language? Yeah, and you sort of just spoke on that, but oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I guess that's interesting. So body language obviously is a key in that that makes it harder.
Yeah, I feel like you're seeing my face, and that's like the most body language you get. But you don't see like how my body's positioned so much, or my arms. I feel like it depersonalizes it a little bit more. Yeah, like just think about when you have like your intimate conversations with people you love, you get closer to them, or you lean in forward and you like kind of look at them, or you just bounce off of them in a different way. Like it just feels more natural. In video chatting, you're just like looking at someone and maybe trying to maybe you become more focused on like how you look than thinking about what's actually happening. So I've had to shut off my camera in our counseling session, so I don't worry too much about like my hair or whatever is going on.
Yeah, that's so funny. Man, so one of the lines that really sticks out is we all stuck in this matrix trying to hide our misfortune. You know, well, the line before that, but what's really important is such a silly distortion. We're all stuck in this matrix trying to hide our misfortunes. And I think about sort of like that cropping of the sadness, like the vulnerability, like it till this day. And I'm obviously, you know, not an expert, but I would reckon to believe that it's still taboo to go on social media and Instagram and sort of like post like what you're going through, like your misfortunes or whatever. And it's a double-edged sword, and this is why I say that. I think there is a population of people that will have empathy and be like, oh
Mm-hmm.
man, and whatnot, how can we help and things of that nature. But then there's this, on the flip side, there's people that will dismiss as it's not genuine. They're only clout chasing. That, you know what I mean, man, just doing it for the likes, this, that, and the third, which is also detrimental. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and I can imagine that it. Let's say if I do decide, right, if I'm a young person or anyone, and I decide to go on Instagram and tell my story and share something very vulnerable, right? That one time I do that, I get what I described, the latter part, and I could see that being a deterrent from me
Yep.
ever, seeking teletherapy, this, that, and the third. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like this matrix, kind of like this perpetuation of like lack of vulnerability or acceptance of like messiness in people's lives.
Right.
And what's interesting is when seen people, what I've noticed when people share personal stuff, it feels good or it feels okay when it's just one post and it's thought out very positively, like it's reflected really nice. But
Yeah.
if you're doing it constantly and you're constantly sharing like your struggle, then people are like, all right, this is too much. Like, I'm gonna block your story. And it's like, no one wants to hear like the day-to-day, like raw, like this is how my mental health is impacted. And that's on social media. In real life, it's the same way. Like no one, like you're in it until it puts you in an uncomfortable position, or it takes a toll on you. Like you have to do something, and like, oh, it's like until it just gets in the way of my living.
Right.
Then
It impedes my quality of life.
Exactly.
My routine. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like we're all good with like this is how I learned, and now I'm like body positive, and like here's where I was before, here's where I am now, like once a year, like maybe on a birthday post or something. But if you did that every day and you talked about the in and out struggle of like trauma or depression or anxiety, I feel like people would be more deterred to wanting to hear that and might like block you.
Right.
Maybe there's folks out there who is super empathic and want to see that on their feed, but I feel like the majority, like what I notice is the majority of folks are like, nah, because it happens in our day-to-day living.
What does that say though about our society, about what we accept and what we normalize and what we find as trivial or novelty? Like, what does that say about us? The fact that we have somebody who may be operating from a well-intentioned, authentic, sincere place, but it's too much, man. I'm gonna block this person. So, because you think about the significance of blocking someone. I block somebody, I block people, but because of whatever, right? Maybe they're, I find what they're doing as disrespect or whatever. Yeah. But the idea of blocking someone, which is normalized because that person is sharing their truth, they're sharing their vulnerability. What does that say about us as a society? Like,
yeah, it goes back to like, it just, our discomfort with vulnerability, our discomfort with messiness and like real life situations, real life trauma. So, and it's mixed. Like some folks might be discomforted because they have their own stuff going on and they can't handle someone else's stuff and they just don't know it. Like it might be conscious or unconscious.
Sure.
Or or it could just be like they're like over it. Like they just don't want to hear it, or they don't know how to respond. Like some folks just don't know how to comfort someone. They don't know what to do. 9 times out of 10, when someone's in distress, they don't want you to problem solve them. They just want you to listen and be there. So yeah. So I think there's like a mix of things, but there is this overall discomfort with vulnerability, with rawness, with people being dysfunctional or not acting in a functional way. So
Wow. Look, we're getting so much feedback, and I appreciate this. Let's take a look. So we have Shimona. Shout out Shimona all the way out of Australia.
Hey.
Facts. This is such an interesting conversation. I find we're all good and here for it until it's too much. Once it's too much, people want no parts, right? So it's echoing what Amy just said. I feel like people like to turn to social media to distract ourselves so people don't want to relate. Wow.
Yep.
It's tough to use social media as a space for vulnerability because you fear the outcome. Absolutely. And sometimes it feels ingenuine and attention seeking. Yeah. I mean, these are all good stuff, man. Keep it coming.
For sure.
Like, so one of the things that, you know, while you were sharing what you just shared, that came to mind that I've been fascinated with in the last maybe the last year or two was the way in which, and I don't want to get too morbid, but I think there's some correlation here, the way in which that we mourn and its relationship to social media. So I'll give you an example. You know, I'm a hip hop head. Nipsey, you know, Nipsey, when he passed, man, it hurt.
Yeah.
Right? It deeply hurt. And I see this with like celebrity death, right? When someone of like Nipsey passed, the following day or maybe hours or whatever, everyone posted a picture of themselves with that person, and it almost felt like, and I could be, you know, it could be an indictment on me, but it almost felt like it was less about grief, and I don't want to police someone's grief, but it was more or less everyone trying to show how connected they were to the person who passed. And I see this regarding celebrities and or people who have it could be a local celebrity, it could be someone who has a lot of quote unquote clout. What do you think that is? Like this do you see that, or is that something that you see?
Yeah, I've noticed there's this weird thing that happens, and even for folks who weren't even like connected, like they've never met him, but like they just know of him and they felt this like grief too. And it's interesting. I feel like it's normalized now to grieve in ways that didn't exist before. Like grieving now, it does include kind of social media.
Exactly.
But there's this this thought that I had about like expectation. Like if I don't post something about my connection to this person, will I then seem like I didn't care about the situation, or that I didn't care about that person wasn't important? So the intention, the motive behind it becomes more about what people think of me than like what my grieving process and my reflection, and maybe getting you to grieve with me and you to reflect on what this means for you. So I feel like there's an expectation that this is the way we grieve people. And I'm thinking about it with Kobe too. Like,
Kobe, right.
So many people were grieving Kobe, but people who didn't have connections to him, but it almost felt like everyone had to post something about it. And it could have been helpful for only the person themselves know if that's still in their like grieving process. But yeah, it's weird how we grieve now.
It's so crazy, right? Like these are the norms, and it's just like I you know, because it's so funny you mentioned that, because Schoolboy Q, in relation, I'm kind of still sticking to the Nipsey thing. He received a lot of flack because he did not post about Nipsey. Like people will really like, and he had to kind of make like a formal statement, like, look, man, you know, R.I.P. Nipsey, but you know, let me grieve the way I grieve. You know what I'm saying? And he sort of went against the grain. But yeah, like it's so crazy how I don't know when it happened, but how these cultural norms just kind of just come and we subconsciously just abide by them, you know.
We all stuck in the matrix.
We all
according
stuck in
to
the matrix. We got we have some hold that thought. More comments. Jen Jackson, yes, social media is a place for people to escape or find inspiration. So to see negativity or being inundated with that type of stuff can be overwhelming. Love you, Amy. Shout out, Jen. Literally everything you post on social media is or has to do with others. That's a pretty impactful statement to say, right? Like, whether I don't like, do you agree with that? Do you think
it
think it
can
has
for
to do
folks?
with, what's that?
I mean, it can for folks. I feel that, and Cordae like kind of goes into that. It's more about like how others see me versus like, but it's still connected to yourself in some way, right? Like if I'm having trouble processing grief, if I'm having trouble processing my pain and my suffering, if I'm having anxiety about like, you know, people forgetting me, which is something he mentions, like being afraid of being forgotten, and I don't know how to process that, then my posting on social media does become about myself and me getting something out of this community, but it also becomes connected to others and how getting something from others and how they can respond to me and feeling, you know, kind of fulfilling something for me. And, you know, I think about this in the first verse, right? So if you go back to the lines, but no amount of legs can heal up all this pain that I'm feeling, maybe conceal it and hide in all these problems we deal with. I grew up on the principle to raise a child need a village.
Yes. So did I.
We all like, yes, we grew up on this principle, but it almost makes you feel like that line after kind of sharing how I'm suffering and I'm in pain and I'm seeking social media to kind of help with this. You know, it's like, okay, so who is my village now? Is my village these folks who are like liking this stuff? And is there like a parenting process that is like kind of resurfacing with social media? Am I looking for something in social media that I didn't get as a you know, as a young kid in my community, as
sort of
a
like
young
an
immigrant
external
woman
validation
or girl?
Like an external validation,
exactly. So like an external validation. So like if I didn't feel loved by my parents, if I didn't feel loved by my siblings, by my community, if I felt neglected, then I still carry this like wound of wanting to get parented in this way, feel loved, feel connected, feel accepted. That still carries with you, you know, like whatever we experience when we're younger still kind of comes with us into adulthood. And then it's like social media is such a quick like form of validation. Like you want to get people to like something or to tell you they love something about you. Post something really cute, post something that's like you know, like you on a trip somewhere like super bougie, right? And then you very quickly will get likes, you very quickly will get a comment.
Absolutely.
So it's like I thinking about like who am I maybe unconsciously, unintentionally allowing to be my village and like parenting things that I didn't have growing up. Like I didn't have a proper parenting. So now I'm kind of seeking this in this way.
Listen, I think I'm gonna hide underneath the desk because I just got triggered. Like yo, because if I could, I mean, if I could respond to that and just share, I think a lot of the reason why I got into music and creating and writing was because I definitely dealt with abandonment issues. I was in foster care and I lived in a lot of houses. Like I was one of those kids where like I had like you know different families that took care of me, like you know what I mean, like that village or whatever, right? And it wasn't because my mom, I was in a single parent household. Wasn't because my mom was neglectful or anything, but she had to make what Tupac would say penitentiary chances, right?
Absolutely.
She had to go to work all night, the second, third shift, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, I was home, you know what I'm saying? And alone. I remember, I could say this now, probably wasn't the best thing, but I remember being home alone 5, 6, 7 years old. You know what I'm saying? Having to watch my brother and sister. That was just the reality and whatnot. A casualty of that was that my mom, while she did preach education, she instilled these values, because she wasn't there physically, I didn't get the love that I needed. You know what I'm saying? The love was there. Don't get me wrong. She would say, I love you and whatnot. But I needed her presence. You know what I'm saying? As much as I did my father. You know what I'm saying? And so I never got that. And so I didn't really have birthday parties or anything like that. I didn't really, I just never had all that stuff growing up. And so I definitely identify with that line in your interpretation, because when I put out music, when like I get joy, like I get this fulfillment and this maybe dopamine effect, you know what I'm saying? Where like when people recite a rhyme to me, that they, you know what I mean? Like yo, if I'm dating you and like you say, yo, if I say, hey, did you listen to my song? And they'll be like, yeah, I listened. And I'll be like, so what lyric did you like? That right there it gives me, you know what I'm saying? So when I see people, fans, not just the likes, but also like really harping in, like there's just something about it. And it's just like, wow, I'm wondering if I'm operating from a place of, I don't know. It's just a lot of that is.
It sounds like there's like a validation, or like just like this, like being heard, that you get from like having someone recite your lines, or knowing like someone is thinking about you, someone is knowing enough about you to like recite your own lyrics to yourself. And I think about this with like immigrant communities, period, or Black and brown folk. Like our parents had to work all the time. They loved us. But like basic needs, right? Like we
survival.
need heat, we need food. So it's like the situation was, we didn't spend a lot of time with like our parents all day. We spent time in like child care or school, and maybe we had an after school program, or maybe we were with our grandparents, like
facts,
which is okay, but that's just, in that process, some of these deeper needs that we need from our parents don't necessarily get fulfilled. And then it becomes a process of kind of being aware of that for yourself, and hoping that you're fulfilling that need in very healthy ways. And not unhealthy, toxic ways. So that's why counseling is important, and building insight on that is super important, because if not, you will be stuck in toxic relationships, or be stuck in really maladaptive situations.
That's real shit, man. So I want to sort of pivot and kind of get apply a different lens to this, right? Because you mentioned something earlier, well, just about the external validation piece, right? And there's sort of like this notion, this rhetoric, or this feeling that particularly with women, young women, this idea of like thirst trapping or sexualizing, certain posts and things of that nature. Doesn't even necessarily need to be a post that's revealing or whatever, in terms of physically or whatever, but this idea where young women in general, have to combat sort of that thing where you got to worry about how people are going to receive something through the lens of like sexualizing and objectifying and exoticizing your bodies.
I feel like that's almost twofold. Like,
talk to me.
As a woman, like I am hyper aware of when I get sexualized, or when I am like posting something and kind of hoping someone won't make some like Hispanic, Latina kind of comment to whatever I have to do, like, then there's also this like, as a woman, is this the way that I seek attention? And I might not necessarily consciously know that what I'm looking for, but I am posting this to seek some form of attention, maybe to fulfill something that's deeper. But then there's also women who are like, this is body positive, and like putting it out there, and they're totally good. Like it's totally coming from a good place. So I always think about like, what are your motives? What are your intentions behind the things that you post? Like exploring that a little bit more. Do you get disappointed when you didn't reach 300 likes on that post? What's going on there?
Yeah.
So, but there is this added pressure for women to kind of, you know, portray themselves in a certain way. Whether you come from like a conservative household or a more liberal household or whatever it is. So, yeah. And then I feel like what adds to it is that it actually like works. So like those likes actually just perpetuate it because then men will see it and be like, yes, and then they slide in.
They slide in
like it's working. Like it did what it was supposed to do. It got you attention and then it got someone to slide in. So like yes, A plus B is that.
That's right. That's so crazy. Like I'm obviously I'm a guy, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really know, but do you, or is women in general, do you know or anticipate, does that awareness include, like, you know, if you post something, right? And again, you could just post something just innocently with a positive intention, but do you anticipate, I know this is gonna yield motherfuckers sliding in my DM? Really?
Cordae says it in here. The lifestyle you advertise was quite strategized. Like everything we put, sometimes it's super intentional. Like, I haven't heard from this person in a while. Let me do something. Like I feel like men do the same thing too. So it's like it's you know, it goes both ways. Yeah, for sure. And you know, the funniest part is like it works, right? So it works. Like that was too easy. Like clockwork. That was expected. God. Yeah.
Yo,
it's all a strategy.
Funny.
So
it's all a strategy. Wow. Let's get to these comments, man, because we're getting a lot of activity. Let me see. A.M. Alfonso. Someone said that's a word. Instant gratification. Let me see. A.M. Alfonso. Who am I unintentionally allowing to be in my village? This was powerful, Amy. Something to keep in mind.
Alyssa.
Shout out to Alyssa, Rudy. Hello, everyone. Our culture has unconsciously raised the importance of a like. I tend to agree. Its value has almost matched that of a degree. Wow. I think there's some validity to that. When you think about, real quick, I've seen this where people, your worth, your value, your merits is measured upon how many followers you have, how many views and whatnot. In my world as an artist, right? Like if I go to a booking agent, or if I'm trying to pitch something in my EPK, which is my press kit, I have to illustrate how many followers or how many likes I average, what are my impressions and things of that nature. All that stuff is primary, and the music is secondary, sometimes tertiary. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's really where I'm like, yo, but did you listen to this verse? Like, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely agree. Great conversation. Let me see. Dope talk. We got a staff meeting at 5, so I gotta bounce. That's what's up.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, shout out to Chuck, man. Yeah, so I mean, and I don't know how much if you've seen Black Mirror.
I haven't seen Black Mirror.
Okay, so Black Mirror is this. The premise of it is it's an anthology of episodes in which social media and technology sort of play a part in a very exacerbated way in people's lives. It's very futuristic. However, I would dare say that we're probably a week away from Black Mirror, like just the way that we are, right?
Yeah.
One of the episodes, there's a young woman who she has a phone, and basically each interaction that she has, she gets more points and more likes, and the more points or likes that she gets, the more she's able to navigate and socially ascend in society. And so you think about people, you think about the idea of, like, not necessarily catfishing, but people putting on that facade you go on someone's page, oh, they have this many likes and this, that, and the third. Now we have the opportunity to purchase views and manipulate our presentation. And so and all that does to a degree afford you a level of access in a social arena that you may never have gotten. Like, isn't that kind of bizarre? Like,
yeah, it's crazy. And that actually just brought me back to what you were saying, when like you have to show that like you have all this clout in order to get something for your career, your professional development. So for you, it's a little different because it's like, this is your career, this is your livelihood, this is your passion.
Right.
But when it comes to just clout in general, because I'm just a lifestyle blogger, then it's like, okay, now I get more free stuff in the mail. I get more like retweets. I get more. Yeah, it's such an interesting like phenomenon, and the thing is, it's like working. Like that's it. Like everyone's playing into it. Yeah. Even myself, like I follow lifestyle bloggers, like we all do. So it's working.
And it's funny because like that determines, like, so you think about it, two people could be essentially saying the same thing, but one has 100,000 followers and the other one has maybe 1,000. We would the natural perception is that this one is a little bit more credible, is a little bit more valid, like so in terms of credibility and validity, like likes, views, followers, all that stuff is paramount. And it's like, yo, that shit's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, that's scary though. Like that's where we're heading. Like I have a daughter, right? And I co-parent, so I'm not with her all the time. I fear that. I try to make sure that her mom and I are aligned in terms of like, yo, how are we going to raise our daughter within the social media space? Like, where for me, I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to give my daughter a cell phone so early. However, that's the norm.
This is real life questions. Yep. Should I get an iPad for them or whatever?
Yeah. Yo, my niece has a phone, and she's 11. She's definitely had it when she was in single digits. Like, you know what I mean? Whether or not there was limited access and things of that nature. But I'm just like, yo, like, I didn't have a cell phone till I was like, now granted, I'm old man, you know what I'm saying? Back in my day, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just like, yo, these are things to think about as my daughter is going to enter this matrix.
Yeah, and it's so funny because sometimes I see like the younger kids, like they'll just watch YouTube all day and they have all these subscriptions to things, to people just talking about random stuff, like unpacking a toy and like describing all the parts of a toy, or
real shit, man. Like, what?
And it's like, what? How is that so normal for you to like search something? How to turn on an iPad is like super normal for like a 3-year-old or
a 3-year-old.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just going to keep growing. Like technology in our life is just going to keep growing. So there's no, unless you live remotely in the FI and like, you have no technology around you, which is like unrealistic for a lot of jobs and like just living in the real world. So the conversation then becomes like, how do I teach? And I don't have any kids, but I'm assuming like if I had a child in social media technology era, like my conversation with them would be, how do I teach them to do this effectively? How do I teach them to, monitor, like, scale down their usage of things and think about everything else, like walking outside, reading books, like painting, like music, whatever it is. How to teach our kids how to be more effective with social media, so it's not like this is driving my life and I've now created an addiction to this.
Right. So. And speaking of addiction, and this will be kind of like the last thing, but I'm seeing more and more the growth of like rehab facilities in relation to social media addiction. And as you point out that it's going to grow, which I 100% agree, how does the work you do, how does the ideation of addiction, like how does that play into, like how do we combat that? How do we engage that? How do we approach that as it grows? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think to add another layer to that is, you know, if there's educators kind of listening and tuning in, like we're working with kids, high school, elementary school, middle school, college students, and like those stages are so crucial in addiction. And kind of being preventative in addictions. And addictions can literally be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be drugs or alcohol. It can be social media use. It can be gambling addictions, which is also changing in this weird way. Like the way we gamble now is different than how we gambled back in the day. So like it's kind of creating more gambling habits. But these are addictions that are easier to kind of hide because they're normalized in some way. Like my social media use can be an addiction because I could spend all day kind of on it and I might feel the need that I need to check, just like constantly check and constantly do these things. But because social media is so big and prevalent in our culture, it's like no one will think about it. But I think as like folks who work with, like I work with college students, like folks who might work with like younger, or people who mentor, who just have like cousins in their lives, like to just be aware of how much time someone spends. And then when you take that thing away, how is it that they're responding? You know, like if I had a little child and I took, you know, the social media, YouTube away, you know, it makes sense that the 3-year-old will freak out and kind of, you know, but that's an opportunity for me to teach them, like, you know, this is how to adjust better. This is how you cope with not having this thing. Here are all these ways for you to kind of handle your distress in this situation. So there's almost, for myself, I always put like this label, I carry this burden of like protecting like younger communities around me. So whenever I see something that's a little bit kind of, you know, like questionable, my immediate response is going to be to like, okay, how do I model like appropriate usage of this? How do I like call something out for you in a way that's soft and you're going to hear and you're going to listen? So I think there's, you know, first is like take it away from them and just see how they respond, just to see like what, you know, because when someone doesn't have something that provides so much pleasure for them, then it's distressing. It's hard. It's like when we don't have food. If I no longer have food, then that becomes hard, and it takes a toll on my body, and like psychologically it does these things to me. And addictions develop in that way. There's things that happen in our brain that create chemicals that make something feel good, regardless of what the point of the addiction was. But I think there's like this call for like those who are in mentor roles or who have access to be a mentor, to just kind of care for our younger communities in this way and to model appropriate usage of social media, and then to check your limitations. Like if that is not something you feel like you can help someone with, like refer them to counseling, make it normal for them, talk about your own counseling experiences. So I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of went a little bit on the tangent.
No. Yo, listen, this is deeper than rap. You know what I'm saying? I like, check your limitations, man. I think that is so profound. Like, and that obviously that takes a lot of self-inventory, right? To be able to, you know, to be aware of what those limitations are and how we react when, you know, to them and things of that nature. So yeah, I think I agree. It wasn't no tangent, you know what I mean? Wow. Man, we are just about done.
Yeah, we have some comments here too. It's crazy.
Yeah. Let's read through them. So let me see. We have someone says put on Black Mirror. on your Netflix list, so you better do that.
Okay, Harlan.
Did you see the episode where people live by likes? Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
China citizens are being over monitored, kind of like that episode. Obviously not as exaggerated, but the episode